You're not here by coincidence. You came across this video because something inside you shattered. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was a failure so humiliating you still can't even put it into words. Maybe it was that slow, silent realization that the life you were building had no real foundation, and now you're sitting in the debris, staring at the fragments, wondering if there's even a version of you worth rebuilding. Good, because that destruction is not your ending. That is your raw material. Every emperor who ever rose to power began in disorder. Every man who ever became untouchable first endured being completely broken. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince from comfort. He wrote it in exile, in disgrace, from a place where they broke his body and expected his mind to follow. It didn't. That is your first lesson. The world can shatter your circumstances, but it cannot break what you decide to become. But most men in your position stay stuck too long, over-explain their pain, and chase sympathy in a world that only respects strength. Not you. Not anymore. Drop a comment right now and say, "I am the rebuild," because that is the agreement you are making with the most dangerous version of yourself. Number 2, the identity autopsy. Before you rebuild anything, you must face the truth about what actually collapsed. Not the surface-level story you tell others, not the version where someone else takes all the blame, the real version, the one that whispers to you at 3 a.m. when everything is quiet and truth gets loud. Because here is what Machiavelli understood that most men never grasp. You cannot build power on a foundation of self-deception. You cannot become untouchable while lying to yourself about how you ended up here. So now we do what most men are too afraid to do. We cut it open and examine it. Ask yourself this: who were you before everything fell apart? Not the persona you showed the world, not the mask designed to keep others comfortable. Who were you really? Were you living by your own code, or were you acting out a version of yourself created to earn approval from people who never deserved your energy? Were you building something real, or were you chasing validation disguised as ambition? Most broken men, when they finally become honest, realize one brutal truth: they never had a solid identity to begin with. What collapsed wasn't a strong man under pressure. What collapsed was a constructed image that was never rooted in anything real. And that is not weakness, that is clarity. The Machiavellian does not run from truth. He turns it into a weapon, because once you identify what was hollow, you know exactly what must be rebuilt with steel. This is the autopsy. You place every part of your former self on the table. Your beliefs, your habits, your relationships, your self-image, and you ask one cold, precise question about each piece. Does this make me stronger, or does this make me easier to destroy? Anything that makes you easier to destroy gets eliminated. No emotion, no nostalgia, no hesitation. The weak grieve what they lose. The powerful examine what no longer serves them and move forward without looking back. Go to the comments right now and type, "I audit, I evolve," because that is exactly what you are doing. Number 3, the Machiavellian core. Now that you've completed the autopsy, now that you've laid every empty piece of your old self on the table and faced it without flinching, it's time to understand what you are actually building. Not a temporary mood, not a boost of confidence, not some motivational high that disappears in a few days. You are constructing a core, an internal structure so strong, so deeply rooted in discipline and self-mastery that no person, no failure, no circumstance can reach inside and destabilize you. That is what Machiavelli was really teaching. Not manipulation, not cruelty, not the shallow villain philosophy weak minds reduce him to. He was teaching how to become unshakable in a world built to shake you. The Prince was never just about politics. It was a blueprint for psychological sovereignty. It was Machiavelli observing human nature with brutal clarity and saying the world is exactly as harsh as it is. So stop being shocked by it and start mastering it. That is the Machiavellian core. It is the decision to see reality without illusion. It is the commitment to never again outsource your stability to another person, another result, or any external condition. Most men build their identity like a fragile stack of cards based on what others think, on relationships, on job titles, on someone else's definition of success. And the moment one piece is removed, everything collapses. The man with a Machiavellian core builds differently. He builds from within. His identity is not tied to what he owns. It is forged in who he is when he has nothing. That is the version of you that becomes truly untouchable. Not the man with the most status or the loudest image, but the man who remains completely himself when everything around him turns to dust. Go to the comments and type, My core is unbreakable. Say it with conviction because you will need it. Number 4, the silent strategy. There is something the broken version of you did that you may not have even noticed. You spoke too much. When life hit you, you explained everything. You defended yourself. You exposed your pain to people who quietly stored it as weakness. You searched for understanding in rooms full of people who were only pretending to listen. And every time you tried to justify your fall, you handed them ammunition they would eventually use against you. This is one of the most dangerous mistakes a man can make in his lowest moments. And almost every man makes it because pain demands attention. Humiliation wants to be heard. The wounded ego craves validation the way a drowning man reaches for anything that floats. But here is the truth Machiavelli understood and most modern men have forgotten. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a weapon, and it is one of the most powerful tools a man has while rebuilding himself. Think about every predator in nature. The lion does not announce the hunt. The wolf does not explain its plan to the sheep. Real power moves quietly. It observes without revealing. It calculates without broadcasting. It rebuilds without putting on a performance for an audience that never deserved a front-row seat to your transformation. When you go silent after being broken, something shifts. People who dismissed you begin to feel uneasy. People who enjoyed your downfall start looking over their shoulder, because silence from a man who was once loud signals only one thing. He is no longer reacting, he is preparing. And a man preparing in silence is far more dangerous than a man loudly declaring his intentions. This is where you reclaim your psychological power. You stop explaining yourself to those who have already judged you. You stop seeking closure from people who were never going to give it honestly. You stop performing your pain for a world that consumes it as entertainment and gives nothing meaningful in return. Instead, you turn inward. You become disciplined. You become intensely focused on the construction happening within you while the outside world wonders what changed. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them fill the silence with their own assumptions. Because while they are busy talking about you, you are becoming someone they are not ready for. That distance between who they think you are and who you are becoming, that distance is your greatest strategic advantage. Protect it at all costs. Never perform your growth for an audience. Never reveal the blueprint. Let them see only the finished structure. Go to the comments right now and type, "I move in silence. I strike in strength." Because this is no longer just a statement. It is your operating system. Number 5, the reconstruction of self. Now we arrive at the part that separates the men who simply survive from the men who are truly transformed, because survival is not enough. Every man who has ever been shattered stands before two choices, like two doors in a dark corridor. Behind the first door is the man who rebuilds himself exactly as he was before. Same beliefs, same patterns, same blind spots, same emotional weaknesses, just slightly more cautious, slightly more guarded, moving through life with the permanent tension of someone expecting another blow. That man survives, but he never truly lives. He carries his past like a chain around his ankle, and no matter how far he walks, he never truly moves forward. Behind the second door is something entirely different. Behind the second door is the man who sees the breaking as the most ruthless and honest teacher he has ever known, who extracts every lesson from the destruction with precision, who uses pain not as something to heal from, but as something to forge himself through, emerging as someone fundamentally and permanently different from who he once was. That is the door Machiavelli would choose. That is the door this channel, Machiavellian Galaxy, exists to push you toward. So now, let's break down what real reconstruction actually looks like. Because it looks nothing like what the self-help industry tries to sell you. It is not writing your emotions into a leather journal. It is not standing in front of a mirror repeating affirmations until they almost sound believable. It is not a weekend escape, a hype playlist, or waiting for motivation to arrive like a reward. Real reconstruction is cold. It is structured. It is precise. You are not healing. You are engineering. You begin by deciding with absolute clarity and zero negotiation what this new identity stands for, not how it appears to others, not what makes you likable, agreeable, or easy to be around. What it stands for. What are the non-negotiable principles that will dictate every decision you make from this moment forward? What are the standards beneath which you will never again allow yourself to fall? No matter the situation, no matter the temptation, no matter how loud the outside world becomes, these principles become your internal constitution. And unlike the fragile identity you had before, the one built on approval and circumstances, this constitution cannot be voted out. It cannot be shaken by opinions. It cannot be broken by setbacks or betrayal because it exists within you, forged in the most intense fire you have ever walked through. Then you begin constructing your habits around that constitution, like walls around a fortress. Every disciplined morning, every hour of focused work, every boundary you enforce, every moment you choose long-term power over short-term comfort, these are not just habits. They are acts of identity reinforcement. They are proof, through action rather than words, of exactly who you are becoming and exactly who you refuse to ever be again. Because here is what most men fail to understand about identity. It is not something you find. It is something you decide and then defend through relentless daily action. The man who waits to feel like his new self before acting like his new self will wait forever. You act first. You build first. The feeling follows the action, not the other way around. And slowly, piece by piece, discipline by discipline, boundary by boundary, the new structure begins to take form. Not the fragile, approval-driven, circumstance-dependent version of you that the world managed to break, but something older, something colder, something that has faced its own destruction and consciously chosen to become what destruction could not finish. Go to the comments right now and type, "I am being forged, not fixed," because that difference changes everything. You are not repairing the old version. You are creating an entirely new one in iron. Number 6, the enemy within. You have been focusing on the wrong enemy. You have been so fixated on the people who betrayed you, the situations that caught you off guard, the world that seemed to work against everything you tried to build, that you overlooked the most dangerous opponent you will ever face. The one inside your own mind, the one that speaks in your own voice, the one that knows every fear, every insecurity, every hidden wound, and uses that knowledge against you with a level of precision no outside enemy could ever reach. This is the enemy within. And until you confront it with the same cold, strategic awareness that Machiavelli applied to power, everything you build will remain exposed. Because here is the harsh truth most men spend their lives avoiding. Your greatest limitation is never the obstacle in front of you. It is the narrative inside you. It is the story you have been quietly telling yourself consistently and with full belief about who you are, what you deserve, and what is possible for someone like you. That story was written long ago, written through pain you didn't choose, environments you didn't control, and people whose own brokenness shaped your earliest understanding of yourself and the world. And for years, maybe decades, you have lived inside that story as if it were fact, as if it were fixed, as if the narrative created by your worst moments defined your full potential. It does not. It never did. It was always just a story. And the Machiavellian understands something about stories that most men never grasp. Whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. In politics, in war, in the courts of the Renaissance, Machiavelli observed rulers rise and fall not just because of what they did, but because of the story surrounding their actions. The one who controlled perception controlled power. The same principle operates inside your mind with ruthless accuracy. The story you tell yourself about yourself is the most powerful internal document in your life. It determines which opportunities you go after and which ones you abandon before they even take shape. It determines how you interpret setbacks, whether you see them as proof of your limits or as data in a larger strategy. It shapes your decisions, your boundaries, the people you allow close, and the standards you uphold when no one is watching. So the reconstruction of identity we spoke about must begin here with a ruthless, unsentimental audit of your internal narrative. You identify the lies disguised as self-knowledge. You expose the fears pretending to be realism. You find the places where someone else's voice settled into your mind and began speaking as if it were your own. And you remove them not with empty affirmations, not with forced positivity, but with evidence, with action, with the steady accumulation of proof that the story was wrong. Every time you do what is difficult, you rewrite a sentence. Every time you enforce a boundary, you rewrite a paragraph. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, integrity over convenience, long-term vision over short-term relief, You are writing a new document, one that reflects not the broken man shaped by his past, but the sovereign man defined by his choices. And over time, that new story becomes so reinforced by lived experience that the old one loses its grip entirely. It does not vanish overnight. The enemy within is patient, and it knows your weak points. There will be nights when the old narrative floods back in the moment your guard drops. There will be moments of failure where that voice becomes louder, more convincing, more familiar than the identity you are building. In those moments, you do not argue with it. You do not negotiate with it. You do not try to think your way out of it. You act, you move, you execute the next disciplined step. You make the next correct decision. Because action is the only language the enemy within cannot debate. It can distort your thoughts. It can flood you with doubt, but it cannot follow you into motion. Go to the comments right now and type, "I control the narrative," because the moment you claim that, the enemy within loses its strongest weapon. Number 7, the power of selective trust. Now that you have started dismantling the enemy within, now that you are rewriting your internal narrative and building an identity grounded in discipline rather than damage, you must shift your focus to something just as critical, something most broken men get completely wrong after they fall: the question of who gets access to you. Because here is a truth Machiavelli understood with absolute precision, a truth proven in the courts of Renaissance Italy through betrayal and power struggles over centuries. Your circle is not just social, it is strategic. And most men, especially after being broken, make this decision based on wounds instead of wisdom. They allow people in because they feel alone. They keep people close because of history, even when loyalty is weak. They mistake familiarity for trust, comfort for alignment, and the absence of betrayal for true allegiance. And in doing so, they hand over access to their rebuilding process to people who are never qualified to hold it. Understand this clearly. Not everyone who supports your comeback was there during your collapse. Not everyone who appears when you begin rising again stood beside you when you were falling. And not everyone who calls themselves your ally is truly invested in the powerful, uncompromising version of you that you are becoming. Some people preferred the broken version of you because broken men are easier to control. Broken men are less threatening. Broken men don't enforce boundaries, don't demand standards, don't outgrow the roles others assign to them. The moment you begin rebuilding with real power, real self-respect, and real clarity, some people will become uncomfortable. And that discomfort will not always appear as open opposition. It will come disguised as concern. It will show up as subtle discouragement. It will sound like jokes with just enough edge to weaken your confidence. It will come from people who constantly try to redirect your ambition into something smaller, safer, more convenient for their comfort. The Machiavellian sees through all of it. He does not become paranoid. Paranoia is simply fear disguised as intelligence. But he becomes selective. He studies behavior over time instead of blindly accepting words of loyalty at face value. He observes who celebrates his victories without hesitation and who celebrates them with a quiet reservation. He notices who pushes him toward his highest standards and who subtly pulls him back toward his weakest patterns. He understands that trust, real trust, is never handed out freely. It is built through consistent proof gathered over time and tested under real pressure, and he designs his inner circle accordingly. The outer ring is for acquaintances, people he remains respectful and professional with, but to whom he reveals nothing of real strategic importance. The middle ring is for allies, individuals who have shown alignment in values and consistency in character, but who have not yet proven themselves under deeper tests. And the innermost circle, the sacred, protected, carefully guarded inner circle, is reserved only for the rare few who have proven through action, not words, through sacrifice, not sentiment, that they are genuinely invested in his elevation rather than his limitation. Guard that inner circle like a fortress, because every powerful man who has ever fallen, whether in history, politics, business, or life, did not fall because the outside world was too strong, but because the inside circle was compromised. Your reconstruction depends not only on what you build within yourself, but on who you allow near that construction. Choose with awareness. Choose with clarity. Choose with the cold, precise intelligence of a man who has already paid the heavy cost of choosing wrong. Go to the comments right now and type, "My circle is my strategy," because from this moment forward, access to you is a privilege that must be earned, never assumed. Number 8. The art of becoming dangerous. There is a version of you the world has not yet witnessed. A version that has remained hidden because the conditions were never right for it to emerge. But understand this, that version has always existed, waiting beneath the weight of misplaced loyalty, beneath years of shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never built for your full potential, beneath the accumulation of compromises that seemed small in isolation but collectively diminished you far below what you were capable of becoming. That version of you is not soft. It is not desperate to please. It does not negotiate its value, apologize for its presence, or make itself smaller to keep insecure people comfortable. It is disciplined in a way that unsettles average men. It is focused in a way that cuts through distraction like a blade through silk. It is the version of you shaped by fire, sharpened by betrayal, clarified by loss, now operating not from emotion, but from pure, controlled, sovereign intent. That version of you is dangerous. And dangerous in the Machiavellian sense does not mean destructive. It does not mean cruel, reckless, or driven by revenge. Dangerous means you are no longer controllable through manipulation. Dangerous means your sense of self no longer depends on external validation, making flattery useless against you. Dangerous means you understand human nature so deeply, its ego, its fears, its predictable patterns, that you can detect agendas before they are spoken and recognize betrayal before it fully takes form. Dangerous means the psychological triggers that once controlled you, fear of rejection, hunger for approval, fear of isolation, the need to be understood, have been identified, studied, and dismantled so that no one can use them against you again. This is what Machiavelli pointed to when he described the prince as both lion and fox, the lion with the strength to face threats directly, the fox with the intelligence to recognize and avoid traps that strength alone cannot defeat. You are becoming both, the lion who no longer flinches when the world challenges him, the fox who sees the trap long before it is set. And when you reach this level, everything begins to shift. The dynamics of your relationships change. People who once saw your kindness as weakness begin to adjust. People who once tested your boundaries encounter resistance they did not expect. People who once dismissed you begin to pay closer attention, not because you have become louder or more aggressive, but because there is something in the presence of a rebuilt man that is instinctively recognized. A stillness that is not passivity, a silence that is not weakness, a patience that is not hesitation, but precision, the patience of a man who knows exactly what he is capable of and has nothing left to prove to those who doubted him. You are not becoming dangerous to harm others. You are becoming dangerous so that you can never again be broken. You are building the kind of psychological and strategic strength that makes you truly difficult to manipulate, difficult to destabilize, difficult to reduce, and impossible to break in the ways you once were. That is the art. That is the transformation. That is what this entire rebuild has been leading toward from the moment you decided to stop merely surviving and start becoming. Go to the comments right now and type, "I am the lion and the fox," because you are no longer one-dimensional and neither is your power. Number 9, the long game. Every man who has been broken wants the same thing immediately after his fall. He wants a fast recovery. He wants visible transformation. He wants to feel powerful again before the wound has even healed. Because existing in that in-between state, that uncertain space between who he was and who he is becoming, is one of the most mentally demanding places a person can exist. And so he rushes. He forces progress. He tries to compress months of real internal reconstruction into weeks of frantic external effort. He makes bold declarations before building the quiet foundation required to support them. He chases visible results before completing the invisible work that sustains them. And when that rushed version collapses, as it always does, because anything built in desperation carries the weakness of desperation within it, he assumes transformation is impossible rather than recognizing it was simply rushed. This is the trap. And Machiavelli, with his sharp understanding of power and human nature, identified it clearly across both political and personal life. The man who cannot control time will always be controlled by it. The prince who moves before the moment is right is not bold. He is impatient, and impatience is simply fear disguised as urgency. The truly powerful man understands something the desperate version of himself never could. The long game is not a backup plan for those who cannot win quickly. The long game is the only path that creates something unshakable. It is the path followed by every man in history who built something that truly lasted. Every empire, every dynasty, every legacy of true power was not built in sudden bursts of chaotic effort, but through slow, deliberate, consistent action compounded over time. This is what you must lock into your mind at this stage of your rebuild, when the urge to rush feels the strongest. The work you are doing right now, the quiet reconstruction, the internal rewiring, the daily disciplines that nobody is recognizing yet, the boundaries you are holding without applause, the standards you maintain in the dark when there is no external reward. This work is not preparation for power. This work is your power. The results will come. They always do. A man who is genuinely transforming at his core cannot conceal that transformation forever. It starts to show in the quality of his decisions. It reveals itself in how he handles pressure, in the calm he maintains when tested, in the level of opportunities that begin to gravitate toward him because he has silently become the kind of man that serious things are drawn to. But none of this can be rushed. None of it can be forced into existence. It must be cultivated the way anything real is cultivated, in silence, in darkness, with consistency and patience, even when there is no recognition. So you commit to the long game. You reject shortcuts. You resist the urge to reveal your progress before it's time. You avoid announcing a transformation that is still being built through your daily actions. You allow the work to speak when it is ready. And when it does, and it will speak with a level of authenticity, a level of undeniable presence that cannot be ignored, dismissed, or taken from you. Because what is built slowly, what is built in silence, what is built through discipline over time, that is the only thing in this world that becomes truly unshakable. Go to the comments right now and type, "I play the long game, I build in silence," because patience is not weakness. In the hands of a man rebuilding himself, patience becomes the most lethal weapon he possesses. Number 10, the untouchable. You made it to the end. And that alone says something about you, because most people leave early. Most people consume a few minutes, feel a temporary surge of motivation, and then go right back to the same habits, the same excuses, the same comfortable misery they have been repeating for years. But you stayed. And truly staying focused, aware, hungry, and honest with yourself until the end is the first act of the man you are becoming. So understand this. Everything we have covered here, the destruction, the identity autopsy, the Machiavellian core, the silent strategy, the reconstruction, the enemy within, selective trust, the art of becoming dangerous, the long game, none of it is theory. None of it is distant philosophy meant to be admired and ignored. It is a blueprint, a cold, precise, battle-tested blueprint for the man who has been broken and has made the unshakable decision that he will not remain broken. And the man who follows that blueprint, who works in silence, who masters the enemy within, who protects his circle with intelligence, who plays the long game with discipline and patience, that man becomes something rare. He becomes untouchable. Not untouchable because life stops testing him. Life will test you again. That is not negativity. That is reality. But untouchable because when those tests come, he does not break. He does not fall back into old habits, old stories, or the desperate need for validation to define him. He absorbs. He adjusts. He responds from a place of deep internal control where no external force can reach his core. Because that core is no longer fragile. It is built from something stronger, something that did not exist before the breaking. Something that could only be forged in the exact fire you have already survived. That is the hidden gift inside your destruction. That is the truth Machiavelli understood, and that the most powerful men in history have always known. You do not discover your greatest self in comfort. You discover it in collapse. You build it in silence. You forge it in fire. And once it is built, it is yours permanently. Untouchable, unmovable, unconquerable. Drop a comment right now and type, "I am untouchable." Say it, own it, claim it fully. If this message reached something real inside you, hit like, subscribe to Machiavellian Galaxy, and turn on notifications. Because what we are building here is not just content, it is a movement. And now, you are part of it.